Lady Lovers, after part 2 of my series on mature lesbians where I talked about Suki Eve, this is the pairing of Suki Panasa and Eve Anwin on the UK soap Eastenders that has been unfolding for the last 2.5 years. I went ahead and watched the show. Or rather, I watched the clips of their storyline, which I have linked in the description if you too would like to go and pursue it. And I have to confess that I got hooked. While I found some of the storytelling over the top and honestly got a bit tired of the relentless and constant high-stakes drama that saw them on and off again a few too many times for my liking, underneath that, I saw a pairing that offered up some delicious chemistry and some powerful performances, and it just got me. As a consequence, I simply must talk with you, my dear lady lovers, about it. The joy of having my own YouTube channel where I can talk about what I want. But firstly, I've got 90% of my viewers who are not subscribed, and I would love it if you did subscribe because I am hoping to hit 50k this year. Now, Eastenders, if you don't already know, is a soap opera from the UK, is set in London in the East End. I'm not entirely sure if this is the first major Sapphic storyline that the show has ever done, but I do get a feeling it is. I know that Suki's daughter, Ash, she had a bit of a storyline around being bisexual, but this is certainly the most elaborate, the most well-planned, and the longest running love storyline for a Sapphic pairing on the show. And I have to say they did an absolutely beautiful job with it, and the actresses had such insane chemistry. Like it's really good chemistry. And that's what really sold it for me. That's what helped me get over some of my reservations around the on and off again dynamic that was going on for a while. What I also loved about the storyline is it wasn't just a love story, but it was also about breaking down and delayering a complex villain. In essence, through this love story, we get to discover Suki's origin story about why she is the way she is, while also giving us a story of a deep love that transcends everything and that's so strong that it helps her face who she is. And then we have Eve, who is this supportive, loving, and patient partner who helps give her the space to explore who she is and to step out of the cage that she's been living in. And that's what makes it, for me, so delightful and juicy to watch. It's not just a love story of two people falling in love. There's an entire character evolution that is going on. Because Suki was introduced as a villain, as I mentioned. She arrived in 2020 and she is this businesswoman who is very intent on building an empire. Suki does have a husband, but her husband is in jail, and this is going to play a lot into the future storyline. But for the first part of her time there, she is on her own. She has raised her 4 kids on her own. And the reason why she has been estranged from Ash is because she had an incredibly homophobic response to Ash coming out as bisexual, which I thought was a very interesting theme to explore, because surely the reason why she responded so negatively to Ash may have been because the way she grew up, even more so because she suspected, I believe, that she was queer herself, and we see her struggle with this a lot, at her trying to deconstruct the deep shame that she experiences around her identity. Suki Panasa is played by Balvinda Sopal, and I just have to give her all the awards. She has done so well with that. She's able to give Suki so many layers and really able to allow Suki's vulnerability to rise up to the surface underneath that Ice Queen facade. And it's really that helps create so much nuance to the storyline. And along with that, we've also got Eve Anwin, who is played by Heather Peace. And you may know Heather Peace from Lip Service. She also has a band, and she's been in a lot of other UK shows as well over the years. And apparently, She had never played queer before she played in lip service, and ever since she played in lip service, she has done nothing but queer roles. Like every role has been queer. I saw an interview where she talked about the fact that she's just so happy to be able to play queer in all of her roles. She's happy to be pigeonholed into that because it's her lived experience, because she herself is a Sapphic. She says it allows her to go around and swagger just a little bit. Not that she can't play straight, I'm sure she can play straight, but she does get to, bring in a little bit of that swagger, and we do get to see that here with the character of Eve. She arrived on Eastenders in summer 2021, so probably around about a year after Suki had arrived, and it makes me wonder, had the writers decided Suki's character was going to have a coming out story before she came onto the show, or was it after seeing Balvinda play her that they decided that she would be perfect to do that? I am very sure that Eve was brought on uniquely with the intention of helping Suki's character have a love story. The way that she actually came on to the show, and I'm talking about Eve's character here, the way that she came onto the show was actually quite lovely. So she had been in jail for aggravated assault, and one of the longtime characters called Stacey had also been in jail for reasons I don't actually know. But she'd been in jail for about 6 months. And in order to help Eve out, Stacey had agreed to marry Eve while they were in jail because Eve couldn't get early parole if she didn't have somewhere to go. She needed an address. And so Stacey decided to marry her so that she would have early parole. And even though I have to say the idea of a fake marriage and them falling in love would have been absolutely delightful, given what we get with Suki and Eve, I don't regret it at all. And so we get to actually see this very lovely relationship between Eve and Stacey where they're living together and they're working together and they call each other their wives in a sort of joking kind of way, but they're both off having their own love affairs. It's very shortly after Stacey and Eve come out of jail that Eve first comes across Suki. And in very soapy fashion, it's an antagonistic meeting. Suki has been working away at building her empire, which means that she has a rental property, and she is currently evicting Stacey from that property for reasons that I'm not quite clear because in the clips I was watching, it wasn't explored. Now, Eve used to be a solicitor, but because of the aggravated assault charge, she has lost her ability to practice. And so she's been disbarred. But that doesn't stop Eve from dressing up as if she was a solicitor and throwing out a bit of legal jargon to try and scare Suki off. But Suki is having none of it. She is not going to be intimidated. And so that's their first interaction, which I thought was a lovely way of establishing the dynamic that exists between them, these two very powerful, strong women who are able to butt heads.
I'm not scared of you. You're a bully, and I can't stand bullies.
Do you really think I care about what someone like you thinks? You're just a washed-up solicitor with a drink problem.
And I don't know, I feel that there's definitely a little bit of tension right from the start. Maybe it's just Suki's steely gaze. I kind of really like it. Now, this moment is right on the back of another storyline where Suki had developed feelings for another woman called Honey. This happened in spring of 2021, where after the death of one of Suki's sons, Jags, she is in a very vulnerable situation. She's bought the corner store and she has an employee called Honey who, she's not the nicest boss. She's a bit of a bully and she hasn't necessarily treated people very well. And so she's used to people giving her a wide berth. But in this moment, when she's very vulnerable after the death of her son, which, by the way, she is kind of responsible for because he died in jail. And the reason why he was in jail was because Suki dobbed him in. And Honey decides to take care of her, decides to extend her hand in friendship, which I think is something that Suki's not used to having. I don't think she's had a lot of friends in her life because she's been too busy working to support her kids, trying to create some financial security. Also, she's living trapped in a marriage, even if the husband was in jail for most of it. But she's very much constrained by her own limitations, and so she doesn't have a lot of friends in her life. And Honey is just such a sweet person who just wants to help Suki through a difficult time, who, through her own sweetness as a character, is able to see the good in Suki, which I don't think a lot of other people have ever cared to try and do. And so she feels very supported and cared for. These feelings start to develop, and you get to see this little storyline of how Suki is starting to have feelings, and it's all done through looks and glances, which, I don't know, that's just lesbian fodder, isn't it? That's just the kind of stuff that we thrive on. And then there's a moment where after a few wines, they're getting all cozy on the couch, and Suki kisses her. And Honey pulls back, and she's very sweet about the whole thing. There is no sense of shame, no sense of you shouldn't have done that. But she does also set the boundary and say that I don't have those feelings for you. And Suki does not take it well, because Suki's coldness and her nastiness is really just a brittle protective armor. And so her response is to get nasty. She starts to bully Honey, and she also even tries to deny that a kiss even happened.
You can't punish me just because I wouldn't take it any further. When you tried to kiss me, kiss. What kiss? Your shift starts in 5 minutes.
She also goes off and has gay panic sex with one of Ash's friends, which is not her best moment. But what I love about her character is, even though we see her being categorically awful to Honey, somewhere I'm still rooting for her. And I'm wanting to see more of that armor become dismantled. And that's exactly what we get in the Suki Eve storyline. Now, after Eve and Suki have their first encounter, they keep crossing paths. Ash tries to bring up the fact that she's bisexual again and tries to have a conversation with her mother around it. And her mum, even though she's just had this experience with Honey, is still unable to acknowledge or accept Ash's sexuality. And as a consequence, Ash turns to Eve because she's the other queer lady on the block, and Eve becomes Ash's confidant.
Why is she messaging you?
Maybe because I was the one who suggested she get as far away as possible from your toxic homophobia.
Eve ends up coming into confrontations with Suki a couple more times.
And you try and force us into holes that we don't fit in. So why don't you do yourself a favour and stop being such a miserable cow?
We get to see this during a Pride event when Suki and Eve end up having words. By the sounds of it, she has had people in her life, people in her family also reject her for her sexuality. And they end up getting put into a police van to cool off after having some words with each other. Although ironically, they're put into the van together, which I don't think would normally happen. But for the sake of the storyline, it's actually a big turning point because they have a more in-depth and proper conversation together.
It wasn't easy bringing them up on my own. I had to be twice the parent. It had to be hard. Because I was the one making them who they are today. And if because of that they turn on me, so be it.
And through this conversation, Eve senses Suki's vulnerability. These antagonistic feelings that have been brewing between them kind of flip, at least for Eve. And so it's that slow progression of them coming into each other's orbit. And the thing that helps Eve and Suki get closer is that Kerat, which is one of Suki's sons, the eldest son, he ends up getting arrested and he needs some help. He needs help with a solicitor. And Eve, even though she's disbarred, she has connections. So she's able to step in and help Suki out. And just in the way these soaps tend to do, they slowly inch towards becoming friends.
Kiss and make up? I might. She will.
Now that Eve's started to catch feelings, she starts to flirt with Suki.
Wish women would stop throwing themselves at my feet.
Which, it's done in such a charming way.
Is there something you need?
I can think of a thing or two. But I'll start with a can of pop.
Suki doesn't quite know what to do with Eve's flirting. Although she is resistant and tries to pretend that she's impervious to it, you can tell that she's just a little bit intrigued. And I think that's the reason why she then invites her to go and have lunch to say thanks. And there's this moment where Eve is trying to tell something important to Suki, and Suki rubs her leg up against Eve, and she completely loses her train of thought. And I thought that was just so cute and so well done, and also very bold of Suki. I do like the way that she is both very bold in her actions and also at the same time incredibly sensitive. And I guess that's part of what has her flip-flopping back and forth a lot through the storyline. But Eve, for Eve, it is a revelation, because up until that point, she didn't know about Honey, and she was ready to drop it until that moment. But the moment that Suki rubs her foot up against Eve is a goner. She is just so done. She is in. She is in it for the long haul. She's in love.
I'm getting a vibe. From who?
Suki. Yeah. I mean, she is stone cold irresistible.
Poor girl. It's going to be a rough and bumpy ride. It does give her the courage, though, to make a move on Suki. I have to admire the way that she totally just went for it. What I liked about this kiss was that she used the kiss to signal her interest in Suki, but it was a very chaste and brief kiss. It felt very respectful, I guess. But for her efforts, she got a slap in the face because, whoa, Suki is just not there, even though you can totally tell that she is interested. She's also just not able to handle that. But it's Eve's persistence, and I want to say respectful persistence, that slowly starts to work away at Suki's defences.
You misread the situation.
If you say so.
I think you know me.
Suki, I don't think you know yourself.
Because Suki does want to be around Eve. And when her role in the death of Jags, her son, is known by her other children, they disown her. She finds herself in a vulnerable position again. And it's through this vulnerability, it's this moment when her guard is down, when she is not able to gather herself up the way that she normally would, that is the moment that leads to their first proper kiss. Because Eve takes her out to distract her. They find out that they both like death metal, and so Eve kind of invites herself over to Suki's place to listen to her death metal collection. And then Suki says, I think you need to leave now. I did listen to an interview with Balvinda, who was talking a little bit about the Suki storyline and talking about how she and Heather have done a lot of discussion around their scenes and around the evolution of their storyline.
We wanted the slow burn because they'd written some scenes that were, sort of ripping each other's clothes off and pushing, and I was like, I don't want to play that because I don't think it's interesting. And secondly, where do you go after that? It sort of loses its importance as a relationship, because then it just becomes about the sex. And what we both wanted was for it to be about the connection that these two human beings have.
Which I thought was very interesting that they had that much say in how the storyline developed. But also, I love that they were thinking about the longevity of themselves as a couple. I agree, they were completely right not to have them jumping into bed straight away, because when you jump into bed straight away, you take away the tension, right? You want to build that tension. And even though they did a really good job of continuing the tension even after they had slept together, I think if they had slept together at this particular point, it might not have been as impactful as it was when we finally did get to see them in bed together. Now, because Heather is herself a Sapphic lady, I guess she's become a bit of an LGBTQ advisor.
When the first kiss happened, Suki pushes Eve up against the fridge. And I was like, does that look a bit abusery or a bit kind of, forceful? And Heather was like, no, because it's two women. If it was a man and a woman, it may look a little bit like, one is controlling the other, but because it's two women, they're both equals. The power shifts every now and again, but do you know what I mean? So she was like, so it's fine. In lesbian language, it's bang on hot. So I was like, great, okay, we'll do that.
And I have to agree, that was very hard. Now, of course, with Suki taking the step to initiate a kiss like that was a really big moment. But then Eve wanted to slow things down. And the reason why she wanted to slow things down is because for her, it wasn't just wanting to jump in bed with a woman that she's attracted to, is because she's having some very real feelings and she doesn't want things to escalate and burn out too quickly, which is lovely. But of course, for Suki, that also feels like a rejection, probably very similar to the type of rejection that she had recently had with Honey. And so, she's not she's not exactly kind about the whole situation, and it creates this kind of back and forth between Suki and Eve, where Suki is clearly wanting this, but also struggling with her feelings, struggling with the rejection, the perceived rejection of Eve saying she wanted to slow things down, and they keep having these obstacles that come up for them during the storyline. First and foremost is the internal homophobia that Suki is dealing with and her inability to accept herself and her feelings.
I'm not sorry for the way I feel, but you are, aren't you? Deep down, you will always think this is wrong, won't you? Do you think you're the first woman to ever ask me to do this, to hide?
This is the way it is with me.
Then she is attacked by a businessman and he ends up dead. So Suki is dealing with the fact that she believes that she's killed someone and having to dispose of the body and then having the potential discovery of that body hanging over her head. Her kids have disowned her. Then, of course, we have the moment where they do sleep together. This is a revelation for her.
I'm happy.
Yeah.
Very.
This is the first time that she's ever slept with a woman, and it's probably only the third person she's ever slept with, besides her husband and that gay panic sex that she had. And while we don't get any other bed scenes with these two, I do love this one very much because you get to see the emotional impact that that moment has had on Suki. She actually starts to cry, which is just, it was so well done. It was just beautiful, the tenderness that was going on between the two of them. But of course, in typical soap fashion, she is discovered seconds later by her eldest son. He just walks in. He knocks on the door, doesn't even wait, just walks in, which, maybe don't do that, and finds his mother in bed with another woman. Now, he had been aware of rumors around Suki having kissed Honey, but when he had asked his mum about it, she had absolutely denied it, and he had believed her. And then he suddenly finds his mum in bed with another woman. And so he's very confused. He's confused about how his mum could have been so awful to a sister, Ash, for being bisexual, while she herself has been having an affair.
Who are you?
I don't know.
And then Nish, the husband, comes back, and obviously that's going to create a huge amount of drama. We also do discover through the conversation that Suki has with Kirat that Nish is not the good man that everyone had always assumed he was. And in fact, the reason why he went to jail was because he had flown into a jealous rage thinking that Suki was having an affair with the neighbor and had killed him as a consequence. The irony is, and this is why Suki surely already suspected that she was not quite straight, is that she had been having this very intense emotional relationship with the next door neighbor's wife. And so her husband had sensed that and just blamed it on the wrong person and then ended up killing the wrong person. Now, he was getting out of jail. As you would imagine, for someone who flew into a jealous rage and killed someone, he's incredibly controlling. And he says that the reason why he killed this other man was out of love, but it's a very twisted idea of love. And we know that he is bad news when, as soon as he has a conversation with Suki after getting back, that he doesn't regret what he did, he would do it again. And so you know that really that time in jail has not changed him at all. He is just as dangerous as he ever was. And as a consequence, he could potentially fly into another rage if he found out about Eve and kill her. And so out of noble reasons, Suki pushes Eve away. But for Eve, this is incredibly heartbreaking, especially after Suki had indicated that she was wanting a relationship.
What's happened between us? It's changed me.
And then Suki turns around and tells her that she never cared for her.
You love me, I know you do.
I'm married. I never loved you. I used you to explore something and it left me cold.
The drama. I mean, Suki could have totally been honest with Eve about why it was that they couldn't be together. I think that would have been completely possible. But there's just an extra level of drama that you get when one person is holding back the real reason, hiding their emotions and pretending that it meant nothing when in fact it meant everything to her. And so there's some great angst. And I have to say, I have been partial to angst in the past, and the angst level is good. But I also have to say that a certain amount of obstacles is great. It did give us moments like Suki and Eve being able to go off to Leeds for quote-unquote business, but in fact they're just having a bit of a love fest, even if it all happened off screen. It did give us this beautiful moment where Suki, after having done her marriage vow renewals, runs over to Eve's place and they have this tender embrace that is just so gorgeous, where Suki confesses just how much she, I guess, is in love with Eve, how much she cares for her.
It's you, Eve. You're all I've ever needed.
It does give rise to these beautifully tender moments and these beautiful declarations. But sometimes you just want a little bit less of them. And that's my biggest beef with this storyline, is that the obstacles started to get tiresome. The number of times they were on and off again just got a little bit much. And it meant that their relationship was always pushed into this anxious kind of space, into never quite them being able to relax into the love that they were experiencing for each other. They could never truly be happy. We were just given these brief moments, such as, the moment in bed just before Kirat comes in. But each moment of happiness is always immediately disrupted. Also, I found Nish, he's a great villain, but he was just so awful. And I just keep wanting Suki to just get away from him. And I guess that's the emotion that the writers were trying to elicit in me. But it got to a moment where it was too much. What I did think was really wonderful, though, is that Nish being as awful as he was, it helped to illuminate another facet of Suki's character. It helped to deepen our understanding of the type of person that she had to become in order to survive. We see her in a kind of victim mode where she has been worn down, where her self-esteem has been completely shattered in such a way that she kind of loses her backbone. So we can understand how she was struggling to make a firm stand about her desire to be with Eve. What was also interesting is that Suki was also allowing herself to hide inside this toxic relationship because she was afraid to face herself and really deal with her sexuality and what that would mean. I thought the way that they used religion and culture within this conversation was very well done. It was subtle, but it was also present. It was there to flavor the events that were happening without blaming her cultural background or her religion as the reason why she was struggling with her homosexuality. There was definitely flavors of religion coming through with the wedding vow renewals, where we got to see the Guru Granth Sahib. But also during some of the conversations, you would see Guru Nanak framed in the corner of these conversations, which I thought was very beautifully done, as if to telegraph that Guru Nanak is totally fine with Suki and who she is. And then they do have the Gyani who comes, who's a priest equivalent at one point in the storyline. And Nish has brought him on in the hopes of Suki being shamed for her feelings for Eve. And yet, that's not what happens. A far more loving message is delivered. And so I loved how they were using the religion and Suki's culture just to help flavor things along the way without it ever being stereotyped. And it also allows that element to be there in the background for the people who have an experience with that, who do connect with that, offering a sense of hope to people who might be identifying as queer and who are seeing Suki as a South Asian woman going through this experience.
I'm trying so hard to like myself, to know that what I feel and what I want is okay. And I'll get there.
When Nish finds out about Suki, such a great scene.
I wanted her more than I've ever wanted anything in my whole entire life. She is, and always will be, the love of my life.
Balvinda completely knocked it out of the park. And I have to say the writers have been very generous in giving us these grand declarations of love. So satisfying to finally see her stepping into her truth there. It was, in my opinion, a little bit overdue. But again, we get to see Suki in such a nuanced and fully fleshed way. And we get to see her unlocking her heart and perhaps also becoming a better person. Now, with Suki having declared her love for Eve in categorical ways, the drama does not stop there, because Eve almost gets killed by Nish. Suki thinks that Eve is dead, and it looks like she's about to take a few too many pills, if you know what I mean. And just as that's happening, Eve emerges. And from that moment, it feels like Suki has finally been able to overcome the internal battle within herself so that she can finally leave Nish. And obviously then there's more drama occurring because Nish does not take it well. It's around Christmas time that this all happens. And then there was this big storyline that was teased on Eastenders for months in advance called The Six, where 6 of the female characters from Eastenders were going to be implicated in a murder. For a moment there, you might have thought that Nish was going to be the person murdered because he turns up drunk and belligerent and tries to attack Suki and force her to come home. He gets knocked out. Another man ends up dying and he gets buried under the cafe. I mean, this is where things get a little bit crazy. And so suddenly these 6 women are implicated together, but Eve is not part of the 6. And so the moment that Eve and Suki get together, in a sense, we're being denied a kind of happy moment in their relationship because Suki immediately has a secret that Eve does not know. And one of the markers of the Suki and Eve relationship up until now is that Suki has been able to be pretty honest with Eve about everything. I mean, she admitted to her guilt around having put her son in jail, which led to his death. She told Eve about the fact that she got attacked and that she killed this guy. Maybe not straight away, but Eve was one of the first and only people that she told about this. And so Eve had become this person that Suki trusts implicitly, and then the storyline occurs, and then suddenly Suki has to keep this big secret from Eve, which I did not appreciate, especially as it's right when Suki and Eve are finally able to get together. And so all of the drama ends up revolving around the situation of this person who is buried underneath the cafe. And there's no real moment for us as an audience to enjoy, after all this drama, to enjoy Suki and Eve just being a couple together. You know, I want some domestic fluff.
I think we've earned it after 2.5 years of constant struggle,
Constant angst, of constant high-stakes drama, of constant obstacles coming in their way. It would be lovely if Eastenders could just give us a period of time where just, you know, peppering it in there where we can actually see them being a loving couple together. But it seems like the writers just are not going to do that for us. Although, who knows? I mean, they've been together for 4 months now, because this is my hope. This is my hope for the pair. I hope they're going to be a long-term couple for the show where they get to basically be a married couple. So what I want for them is to become completely entrenched as a couple on the show for the long term, and whatever drama they throw at them will help them grow more solid as a couple. And I really hope that they're not going to be too hasty in trying to destroy that couple. All right, have I talked enough about Suki Eve, or have I not? Wow. If you haven't seen this couple and you're still here, amazing. Thank you so much. Go and watch the show. I would love to hear your thoughts on the pairing. If you have watched their storyline, tell me all about what you think, and I will see you next time, lady lovers.